Guest host Erick Simpson joins us to discuss all things Auvik, as well as some hindsight and predictions from the past year, plus an interview with 2020 ChannelPro Peer of the Year, Joanna Sobran. It's ChannelPro Weekly, episode 130, All Things That End in P. Hello, everyone, and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode 130. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine program for you, the ISPs, the MSPs, the VARs, the integrators, the technology specialists, the MSSPs, and any other acronym floating out there that is involved with IT. If any of that made sense to you, guess what? You're in the right place. We've got an awesome show for you today. Lots of cool topics that we're going to talk about in the news. We got a great interview coming up, so you're not going to want to miss that. But we also have a guest host, too. So without further ado, let me also introduce the people who will be here with us for this program. He's here each and every week, always in mind, possibly in spirit, but rarely physically. Executive editor, Rich Freeman.
Hey there, Matt.
And
Greetings
sitting next to him...
California.
Oh, so sorry, what was that you said?
I said greetings from California.
Yeah, we're going to ask you where you are in a second, but that fantastically handsome man sitting next to you, he has been with us before, founder and chief strategist of ErickSimpson.com, Erick Simpson himself.
How's it going, team? Hey, Matt. It's been a little bit. Great to be back. And yeah, we're here in sunny Santa Barbara, California, in case you were just going to ask us that.
Yeah, I see palm trees. I know before we started, I said, if I look out my window, all I see is like ice and goats. So, not nearly as exciting as palm trees. What's the temperature there?
Well, it's a little chilly right now, right, Rich?
It is a little cool.
I'd say it's probably in the low 60s, maybe.
Low 60s.
I will check.
And,
it's like 15 degrees outside here right now.
Yeah.
Well, it's even cooler.
We won't complain.
Yeah, it's it's cold by my standards.
That's why you got the jackets on. That kind of helps.
Yeah.
Anytime I wear that kind of stuff, I always get hot. It's like I always want it to be like 50 degrees or frozen, just so you don't get so hot.
Well, I'd rather be able to layer and bundle up than just it's so hot, nothing you could take off decently would cool you off. So I'd rather it be cooler than warmer. Yeah, indeed. So for those who are possibly new to the show and may not be familiar with you, Erick, could you give a quick one-paragraph synopsis about who you are and what you do? Well, let's hope it's not that long. In another lifetime, I co-founded one of the first pure-play MSPs in the industry back in 2005. It was acquired in 2007. From there, I co-founded MSP University, ran that for many years. Now what I do is work directly with IT providers, MSPs, everything that ends with P that you said earlier to help improve their operational, marketing, sales, and service delivery outcomes. So that's, I speak at a lot of events and I try to give back. I've written several books and, love getting on podcasts with the team here and just, sharing great business building tips for our audience.
And he is also, I should say, the co-host of the ChannelPro 5-Minute Roundup with yours truly. It's like sort of a video podcast thing we do every week. Usually shows up on the website on Fridays.
Yeah, so most of our audience should be familiar with you, but if you only listen to ChannelPro Weekly, and thank you for listening and watching ChannelPro Weekly, you really should check out the 5-Minute Podcast. It's kind of not usually 5 minutes. It's usually a little bit longer than 5 minutes, but only by a few, 10 to 15, I think would be the average. But it's well worth it. Very interesting content, and then you get to see Erick's bright and smiley face. And what you said was interesting because especially from what I hear in California, when you're walking around the streets, a lot of things end in P.
Well, yeah, we do have a bit of a problem, a challenge that needs to be overcome with some of those things. If what you're telegraphing is what I'm receiving, yes.
So just watch where you step. So Rich, what are you doing in Santa Barbara with Mr. Simpson?
So we were both here this week attending the first conference of the year, which was held by Auvik Networks. Big name in network management for MSPs. This is actually their first partner event, their first sort of big in-person partner event. And they did it here in Santa Barbara, California. It was a very interesting show. Erick was speaking. I was covering it. And we were kind of talking off the air before we came on the podcast here about. I mean, it was a very good show and a very different show in a particular way. I mean, normally if a vendor puts on a conference like this, you show up expecting that there's going to be content about, the product roadmap and sales initiatives for the year to come, and maybe technical training and workshops. And there's a little bit of the technical stuff here, but really this event was almost 100% focused on success tips and business growth and business strategy and getting folks like Erick out in front of the MSPs. Most of the people who attended here are business owners. They're not the service managers and the technicians and so on. It was really just about running your business more successfully, and it was kind of not something you see at a vendor conference often. It was kind of nice.
Yeah, I think one of the tip-offs was the title of the conference, right? Frankly, MSP, and I think they brought that really from that. We're going to help you build your business. So let's be frank about this and have conversations about it. And I was also impressed, Rich, by just the diversity from a geographic perspective of the attendees here. I mean, we had people here from all over the world, right? So it was really, really, so it was a big attraction. And it was uniquely different and very intimate, I would say, is kind of the word that comes to mind.
Yeah, it was not an enormous event. I'm guessing there was something like 150 or so MSPs here, but I mean, that worked very well because it gave people an opportunity to get to know each other, and there was a lot of peer-to-peer interaction going on here.
Right, and when I say intimate, I'm more talking about the feel, not the size so much, but kind of the intimacy of the feeling of the event, kind of the aura of it. People were, introducing themselves and having little conversations and with the little pods everywhere. It wasn't much different than what we see at some of these larger events, to your point.
Yeah, that's good. The intimate events are generally pretty fun, especially when you get a lot of really good networking opportunities with interesting people. Now, if I was to look at the headlines that we're going to talk about today, I'm willing to bet a couple of them are about Auvik.
That is a great bet because I really haven't had time to write about too much else. We will talk about one or two other things, but yeah, I've been writing a lot about stuff from this show.
And I'll admit I was cheating. I was actually looking at the headlines, so I knew. It
was a sucker bet.
Should I ask for money? Yeah. So, Rich, let's go ahead and dive into the first story. So, Auvik has some IoT stuff going on. Tell us about that. So,
the first thing I say is, hey, they're not talking about products here, but I mean, I need to talk about products. So I cornered Alex Hoff, the chief product officer, co-founder of the company, and spoke with him about their product roadmaps and got some really interesting insights from him, both in terms of what they have up ahead in 2020 and sort of the longer term plan. And really the big theme, he said, for 2020 is turning the Auvik solution into something that can find, identify any device, anywhere, anytime. And the issue basically is from the get-go, the Auvik solution has been very good at identifying switches and routers and firewalls. They really designed the system from the ground up to be very intuitive and user-friendly and MSP-focused. And so they have what they like to call an out-of-box experience where it's going to do a great job of finding traditional network stuff. But as we all know, SMB environments are filling up with other IP-enabled devices now, smart thermostats and bulbs and all this other IoT stuff. And the Auvik solution will find that stuff now, and it'll put it on the map for you, but it can't really identify it very well. And so a big priority for the company right now, and they're looking to make some strides this year, is to get better at actually identifying what those generic devices, as they call them, really are. And they have an interesting approach to this. The way they're going to go at it, I think, is really interesting because it involves analytics, basically, business intelligence. It's a cloud-based platform. They're collecting enormous amounts of information from all of their different customers and the end users that their customers are supporting. And they're going to mine that data, basically, to see what they can learn about these generic devices. So the example that Alex provided was, let's just say somewhere out there, one of the MSPs who uses our software manually labels a device on a customer network as a Nest thermostat. And then we can kind of look at the traffic flow from and to that Nest thermostat and kind of establish a signature. And then we can use that to find other Nest thermostats in other environments. Anything that looks like this thing over here, which we know is a Nest, it's probably a Nest over there as well. And so that's the kind of analytics-driven approach they're going to use to help MSPs do a better job of figuring out what's actually out there. And the hope is that at some point they can kind of get the population of generic devices out there down to 10% of what is on the network that they're identifying now.
A necessary strategy, right? I mean, the proliferation of IoT devices, that AI, and we talk about BI and things like that. I mean, IoT is going to be ubiquitous here, and in my house alone, right? Not bragging or anything, but yeah, we've got everything. We've got the lights, we've got the door locks, we've got the thermostats, we've got digital assistants. All of these devices are on these networks, and the challenge that MSPs have today is the lack of capability in identifying those devices. And in fact, there are strategies out there, and I've talked to different partners who are utilizing different devices that are not really kind of our industry devices, but are more on the retail side, because retailers have had to deal with IoT devices for a long time. So some of these kind of more retail type devices that can identify, these things that we don't have signatures for, or our existing RMM tools and discovery tools aren't finding. They're kind of cobbling these things together to then upsell clients by saying, oh, well, who's managing all these other devices? And that's dramatically increasing, in many cases, the opportunity to bill clients to not only identify those, but secure them if they can be secured, and support them and manage them. Because today we're not managing any of that stuff, right? But it is, not only coming into the home from home automation, but it's making its way into businesses as well. So that is a whole blue ocean opportunity from an IT provider, MSP perspective, these IoT devices and functions. So I think it's a necessary strategy, and it's a very unique strategy by taking, what the IT providers themselves are using as naming conventions to identify and manage these devices, and then collectively use that, right, then to map out and identify and search out and then establish, okay, now we know what these things are, and provide that kind of support. I think that's really unique.
So it says that it's going to be looking at the data that these kinds of devices are putting out there in order to also help identify them. How deep does that go? Is this just like network packet levels kind of stuff, or are they actually intercepting packets and trying to actually look at the type of the data or the data itself to identify it?
I can't answer that conclusively. We didn't get into the technical detail, but I don't think they're like really inspecting packets very, very closely. I think it's more a matter of traffic flows and patterns and so on more broadly.
Yeah, I think it'll eventually lead to something like that, right? And just recently I went through an exercise at home trying to do the same thing that we're talking about, identify and label things that I have no idea what's on my network. And it took me a while, and I'd go on and I'd look at the MAC address, and there's some websites online that you could drop the MAC address and they'll tell you who the manufacturer of that thing is. But in some cases I'm getting like Lite company, and well, they actually make a chip that goes into these wireless devices, and I have to hunt it down. The toughest things for me to figure out were I had 2 Sony receivers that are, connect to Wi-Fi for updates or whatever. And these were the ones that I just couldn't figure out because they were just identified as a Lite-on device. And then I kept searching and searching, and then I found a Sony forum, and they said, oh, yeah, it's the receiver. I'm like, oh, finally, now I was able to map and identify every single device on my network, which, as an IT person, makes me kind of feel comfortable, right, knowing what's happening on my network.
I just thought you were really bored.
Yeah, well, late at night sometimes when you can't sleep, you got to find something to do.
Hey, I'm with you. I'm all about MAC address inspection at 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
when you have nothing else to do. But you'd think it helps you sleep, but it just makes you more excited. Well, very cool. I don't know if I have a whole lot of other questions about this particular story, but it sounds like it's a cool tool and something that's going to be necessary as IoT continues to proliferate and just end up on every network everywhere.
I'll add one more thing, and it's a bit longer term in terms of their vision, but I think it's something that Auvik users will be interested in. The longer term vision for the product, they said, is for this to become sort of the ultimate network troubleshooting tool, which is different. Today it's about monitoring and tracking and knowing what's out there and being able to report on that and so on. But they want to get to a point where not only are you aware of what's out there and monitoring it, but you can use that information to pinpoint network performance problems and slowdowns and so on, and trigger alerts, and maybe at some point trigger automated responses to those alerts. And so sort of a down payment on that strategy that Auvik partners can expect to start seeing this year is they're going to begin importing event logs, log data into the platform there, so that they can begin consolidating that information and ultimately start sort of analyzing it and looking for what's causing what is it the switch? Is it the internet connection? Where is this thing coming from? Step one in that process to have the log data in one place, and that's something that they're working on now.
Yeah, now that's starting to tread into the territory of a lot of other types of tools that are out there. Because they're not the only ones working on something like this. Eric, what other kind of tools are like that?
These discovery devices that are going out and identifying IoT devices, things like that.
Well, and but some of the other things you were talking about too, like there are tools that will like look at network performances and holes like Network Detective and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I mean certainly we have those types of devices, and some some of the firewalls and the rackable devices that can do network analytics and things like that. Of course, we have sniffer programs that we'll use. But one thing that I've started to see happen on the consumer side as well is some of these consumer grade routers, firewalls, and things like that are building in. It's kind of almost like, I'm a sports, a race car enthusiast, and I love Formula One. I love races and things like that, and we know that at that level, Formula One, billions of dollars are getting poured into develop technologies for these cars to help them win races and all this other stuff. But over time, that stuff ends up in the cars we drive today, right? So I'm seeing some of this happen on the consumer side as well, where some of these capabilities are rolling down to kind of these consumer firewalls. Like, for instance, my firewall, I can, create guest networks. I can segment my network. I can, again, label and identify different devices. I can throttle and control bandwidth to specific devices or to segments of devices and create VPNs. I mean, things that 10 years ago we'd never find in a consumer-grade firewall that you can buy for $100, right?
Right.
So, I think that's, it's great that it's starting here, at the top, but I think over time it certainly benefits and enables, everyday users that don't even think about technology, right? They'll just buy something to hook up to their, to get their Wi-Fi running, and its built-in protocols will automatically help secure that, those connections and identify and allow them, even from a simple basis, even from a phone app, to say, oh, I want to prioritize, my streaming services over everything else because, I'm a cord cutter now. So I kind of see that rolling down, but there are tons of, the usual suspects in our industry that we know that analyze this data. And now I'm starting to see that really push down into the consumer market, which is also very interesting.
So, and I mean, from a business space perspective, in terms of some of the companies that Auvik is sort of heading towards in terms of having similar functionality, so that field is sometimes referred to as AI ops, as in artificial intelligence operations. And there are companies like Splunk and AppDynamics and Logic Monitor that are doing that kind of thing as well. It's Solar. I don't know if they would call themselves an AI ops company or not. They probably would. But SolarWinds has some stuff that does that as well. And And the idea is there's the analytics piece of it and having the data and studying that data and then using artificial intelligence to understand that data and potentially act on it.
Yeah. And you would think that a company like Auvik might see things like these big managed services suites, those are like put those together. They kind of view those as competitors or foes, but apparently that's not the case, Rich.
Yeah, it was something else I got into with Alex Hoff when I was speaking with him, because we are in this era now where we are witnessing the rise of these big managed services suites from ConnectWise and Datto and SolarWinds and Kaseya. These companies are increasingly building Swiss Army knives, essentially, that just do everything that an MSP needs to do. And there's certainly a convenience factor for an MSP and having fewer suppliers versus more. Auvik is 100% on networking and network management. And, in some respects, they're an outlier in that regard. And so I just kind of asked, do you regard all the ConnectWises and Dattos, et cetera, of the world as competitors now or potentially? And the answer was, no, actually. I mean, Auvik really sees itself right now, certainly, as being in a kind of a unique position in the industry, as having maybe the deepest pool of network device information that's really, really tailored to MSPs. And so all these other companies, really, they're partnering with Auvik, and they kind of need to partner with Auvik to get a hold of that information that, most of them can't really get on their own right now. So, I mean, you look at the sponsors at this event, which, like we said, it's not an enormous event. Datto here, ConnectWise, SolarWinds were all major sponsors. Kaseya wasn't a sponsor itself, but ID Agent, which is part of Kaseya, was here. So, I mean, they've got very warm relationships with all of these companies. And if there comes a time down the road where these suite makers add network management functionality, or if one of these companies buys Auvik.
That's what I was just about to say. I'm like, this is a company prime for acquisition, right?
Stay tuned.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing in the article we're talking about here, and I had this swept past me last November, but Auvik placed third on the Deloitte Fast 50. So every year Deloitte comes out with, actually there's a 50 list and a Fast 500 list, and obviously they're on both. But what Deloitte does is look at revenue growth over the last 4 years. And Auvik placed third, and this is not like just tech companies, this is just companies. Their 4-year growth rate, and this is a company that was founded, I want to say, in 2012.
Somewhere, yeah.
Their 4-year growth rate was just shy of 8,000%. Now, again, you're starting, it's a young company, you're starting from a small base, so you're going to see these huge kind of, but they're doing quite well. And from a mergers and acquisition kind of standpoint, it's almost like, why not wait a bit? Because you're going to sell for a lot more a little bit down the road.
Hockey stick growth by anyone's.
Yeah, 8,000%. That's a lot of percent.
Yes.
Like if I had $200, an 8,000% increase is pretty good.
That would be more.
And we're talking about, speaking of the sponsors that were here, they actually almost doubled their target. They said they were going after 10 sponsors, and they actually ended up with 19 sponsors. So folks wanted to get in on this event, and they wanted to engage. So Auvik's certainly on the radar for keeping track of them. And Rich, you and I on the 5-minute roundup, we almost every show there is some M&A news that we break, and we kind of see a pattern and a trend for what's happening. I'm starting to see okay, these are the puzzle pieces on the table, and these equity companies and these other IT vendors are just we can almost see how they're aligning them. We've been talking about it for so long, right? Auvik would be I think a crown jewel in somebody's deliverables. So we'll be
yeah, and we're already starting to see some of that integration that you mentioned earlier. Excuse me. We were talking about that earlier, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But in this conversation that you had with what was it? Peter Hoff, right? Alex Hoff. Sorry, Alex Hoff. Anything else come out of that was interesting?
Well, I guess the last thing, and there was nothing terribly definitive about this, but they have done an acquisition or two in the past, and so I asked about that, and he said they are continually looking, either for a technology that will enable them to do what they're doing today a little bit better, or that will maybe expand the functionality a bit. But it didn't sound like it was, an urgent priority. They're sitting on a big pile of cash they want to put to work or whatever. It's just something that they're looking at. So they could be making, as opposed to being acquired, they could make an acquisition of a smaller company down the road.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll keep an eye out for it when and if that happens. We were talking about integration earlier because obviously we probably see Auvik being bought or being integrated into these larger suites, but at least they're integrated with one product that they announced. What is that one?
So that's Liongard. Liongard was one of those 19 sponsors here at the show, and they're actually kind of a perfect illustration of what we were just talking about there. So what Liongard does, for people who are not familiar with them, it's sort of an automated documentation or documentation discovery kind of solution. So it goes out into a customer environment and collects all sorts of information about Office 365 licenses that are in use, and the BDR systems that are being used. It integrates with VMware, so you can get import all sorts of information about the customer's virtual machines if they have any. And so they're trying to build as complete, as comprehensive a view of everything that is out there in the customer environment that you need to know stuff about. And know, not just know it's there, but know how it's configured, know if it's up and running, et cetera. And just like I said, from their perspective, they really kind of need Auvik to have good network hardware information in that picture that they're providing MSP. So they quietly, it happened last week. Officially, they announced this week that they've integrated their solution with Auvik, and so now, in addition to all the other things that you could see before in the Liongard app, you can now see all sorts of network gear thanks to this Auvik integration. And then you can customize the views. There are lots of sort of interesting things you can do once you've got the information in Liongard. You can actually export that information into third-party reporting tools. So there's reporting functionality in Auvik, but if you're a BrightGauge guy, you can get data from Auvik into Liongard, send it off to BrightGauge, and do your reporting over there. But just another illustration of that somewhat unique role Auvik's playing right now in terms of really kind of understanding the network.
Yeah, is Liongard the only documentation platform that they're integrated with, or will there be future ones like IT Glue?
Well, let's ask the pilot of this aircraft who's yeah, so right now it's just Auvik, and the roadmap is very much driven by partner input, and they, like a lot of vendors, they have an online polling system where they allow MSPs to make requests.
He's circling us now.
He really is.
Well, better the planes than the birds that tried to kill you earlier. He's not trying to dive bomb you, is he?
Not as far as we can tell.
Machine guns blazing.
Yeah, second pass. Is he lasing us? I don't know if he's lasing the
I'm not sure. Well, there you go.
It's like the Red Baron starting to what is it with like you guys all day, like flying things like birds and stuff are just trying to kill you?
We are a magnet for all things flying. Where was I? Got it. So, like a lot of vendors, they have an online polling system. People can suggest functionality that they want, and then they can vote on these suggestions, and that's what really drives what they do. So there were a lot of requests for integration with Auvik. There haven't been a lot of requests yet for integration with, just as a for example, Network Glue. So IT Glue is a huge documentation name. They've got a network management system called Network Glue. Right now, they don't have definite plans to extend there. They could definitely do that, and it just depends on whether their partners tell them that that's something we need.
Very cool. All right. Well, that's a lot of great stuff coming out of Auvik, and I'm sure you probably even have a few more things to talk about in future shows. But they are not the only ones in the news this particular week. Sophos has a story out there this week. Rich, what is going on with Sophos?
Well, once upon a time, Intercept X was their behavior-based network, or a next-generation endpoint security product. And that product came out, I want to say late, it's probably like September 2016. I mean, it's been out there a few years now. So it started out as an endpoint protection solution. Over time, it has expanded from there. So they added a subscription-priced MSP version. Then they added a version of it for servers. And this week's news is they have now extended it to mobile devices. So technically what they did, they took a product that they had before called Sophos Mobile Security, and they evolved that solution, expanded the functionality of that solution, and rebranded it as Intercept X for mobile to really cover a wider spectrum of the devices that MSPs need to protect. So they took the underlying sort of mobile optimized version of the underlying deep learning engine that makes Intercept X work and allows it to spot threats as they happen and shut them down immediately. They created a mobile-friendly version of that doesn't consume quite as much power. They adapted that to this new solution, added that functionality to what Sophos Mobile Security has done before, and expanded the capabilities of Intercept X. It's just been interesting to me. I thought of that as a product, and over time, it's really kind of become a platform.
Yeah, it really has been, because they've added quite a bit to that. So, but so the old system you said is retired; it's going away.
Correct.
And then do partners have to do anything if they're currently using that system? Are they just going to be like upgraded to this, or how does that work?
I don't think they have to buy anything. I don't know very much about whether there's an upgrade process or if it's just, the next time you get an update, it's going to have a different label on it and some new capabilities that weren't there before.
And can you use this? You don't have to use Intercept X, say, for endpoints. You could use just this for mobile, or now do you have to kind of do everything?
These products are still individual, so you can pick and choose whether you're going to use endpoint, server, and mobile, or some subset of that. One of the things I asked them about is will there at some point be discounts for people who do bundle all these products together? That doesn't exist today, but it does sound like it's something that they're very actively investigating. So at some point down the road, there will probably be the way they put it was different product tiers, and there may be some financial advantage to doing all of what it can do. So
Eric, do you use any kind of mobile endpoint protection products like this?
I do use just some antivirus and some light stuff that comes with some consumer versions. As you all know, I don't run an MSP practice anymore, just a small consulting practice. So my needs on the technology side are greatly reduced now, but no, just some very lightweight stuff. So I'm really curious to see and learn more about the Sophos mobile product, because as we know, those of us that have families and we're providing these mobile devices to our significant others and kids and whatnot. It's hard as a technologist to kind of let go of that responsibility to secure those devices, and so far there hasn't been anything on the market, at least that I've seen, that provides that level of security for MDM management that I was used to leveraging in the enterprise or in the MSP practice, things like that. So I think I'd like to see more of that. And the simplicity of the use and management of it is a key factor, right? Because, for me, again, I'm not staying on top of technology like I used to stay on top of it the way I did in the past. And candidly, those business MDM solutions can be a little bit cost prohibitive when you're trying to enter into the consumer market, right? So it's not really a business decision. So, a long way to answer the question to say, yeah, I don't really have anything more robust than what any consumer can purchase online and deploy to their mobile devices.
Yeah, Rich, did they talk about what some of the major improvements are between their old system and the new one?
Well, the key thing really is just the addition of that, real-time, behavior-based, deep learning-based kind of functionality. So you're not, relying on signatures anymore. You don't have to be able to identify the threat. Threats that have just never appeared before. This thing can usually identify just based on what's happening on the device.
Very cool. All right. Well, we're gonna put links to all of the Auvik stories that you talked about, as well as this Sophos news release. They're all on our website. ChannelProNetwork.com is the website. And if you're listening to the show on your phone or tablet, you can go to the show notes page for episode 130, and we'll have links there for everything. If you're watching on YouTube, open up the description area, and we'll put links to all of these stories, because we're mostly just kind of touching on them. There's a lot of other quotes and nitty-gritty details in here that we sometimes kind of go over, because it would take forever if we actually covered everything in depth here on the show. So go and check those out, and make sure that you always visit the ChannelProNetwork.com homepage, because we've got articles and news stories and reviews and all kinds of white papers and great resources going up every single day, all the time. So check those out. One of those stories, in fact, that we're going to talk about coming up here is, well, it's a new year, right? And there's some predictions that we've made and a little bit of looking back. Rich, tell us what's going on with this.
So we're talking here about the cover story for our January issue, and every January, in fact, we have our prediction story, our preview of the year ahead in technology. And this year, because we are, also creative and clever, we figured let's also ask, the way we do it every year is we go out to experts in various fields and we ask them what can we look ahead to in cloud computing and managed services and security and storage and so on and so forth. And this year we decided to ask them as well, what, with 2020 hindsight, if you will, should you have seen, maybe, took you by surprise, et cetera? If you look back at last year, was there something that stands out at you with perfect 2020 hindsight? So I will not get into any or all of the different predictions in the story. We'll have a link to the story in the show notes, so you can take a look at it. I encourage you to get into some of the insights, because this is one of my favorite stories every year to write, because I get to pick the brains of 8 or 10 really interesting people who are deep in these different fields and just hear what they have to say. But a few things that pop into my head here. So I spoke to Michael O'Hara, who is a security expert. And, with 2020 hindsight, he was kind of saying he was maybe a little bit too hopeful that businesses large and small were really going to make this the year that security becomes job number one and everybody's going to get focused on it. But he said there was progress in 2019, but a lot of it was concentrated in larger businesses, which are trying to make more investments in security. And the end result is, relatively speaking, relative to the larger businesses, SMBs are easier pickings for the hackers. And so his big prediction for this year is you're really going to see, we read about, we see headlines about these giant breaches, but there's going to be more activity, more hacking directed at SMBs this year in a process that I love this phrase, he called this digital fracking.
That's a great expression.
Yeah. So, if you know how to do it, there's lots of stuff you can kind of scrape out there from the SMBs, and that's where he expects to see the bad guys starting to go more often this year, because it's just easier to get into the networks, because those guys, no matter how many times you tell them, are quite often not willing to make the investment. Yeah. Any other predictions? Well, let's see. So here's kind of an encouraging one. I spoke with Paul Dipple, who is a very well-known, really, really interesting managed services expert. I always enjoy getting a chance to chat with him. And he said if you're an MSP, you can expect, or really should be thinking about, charging more this year. He expects the prices that MSPs are charging and their customers are paying to go up by a nice clip this year. Partly because SMBs need technology more than they ever have. Partly because there are actually fewer MSPs out there in relation to the need among SMBs than you would actually think. So from a supply and demand perspective, pricing ought to go up. And partly because, and this really was encouraging to hear him say, as the whole managed services model becomes more mature, MSPs are just getting better at pricing. And they're not, just throwing darts at the board, and they're beginning to understand a little bit more what customers are willing to pay, and they're getting more, willing to ask for that. So for all those reasons, if you're not thinking about raising your prices already, you should probably be doing so.
I'd say that's probably a 2020 hindsight thing. If you look back and if you think about what an MSP would have been offering in 2010 versus to what would be in their bundle today, it's probably a massive amount of stuff with way more value.
Yeah, it's a huge topic, actually. I mean, we won't go down that detour, but it's a thing that a lot of MSPs wrestle with. Is they learn about a cool new technology that they want to bring to their customers, and then the question is, do I charge them more for that? Because if I do, maybe at some point, if I keep doing that, they're going to get angry. If I don't charge them more for it, then it's coming right out of my profits. So it's an interesting thing to wrestle with.
Yeah, and I think that when you think about the MSP industry, the age of the MSP industry, like let's say it started in the early 2000s, it did for me. Today, those MSP owners have matured in more ways than strategically, right? So you would think that as we grow older, these business owners are getting more savvy about pricing, bundling, positioning, selling on value, which is something that you guys know that's what I promote, is sell on value. Everything has a value. If someone wants to negotiate on price, ask them what they would like to remove, right? Stay your ground, because everything we do has value. So that's encouraging. And, I always say, if you're not raising your prices once a year, even if it's a small, low single-digit %, just to keep up with inflation. I've got partners that haven't raised their prices in 5-10 years. I mean, it's doesn't make any sense. The cost of doing business goes up. I mean, people are used to business services going up every year, broadband. I mean, even the things that we use as consumers. I'm on some consumer bent this show. I don't get it. But I mean, hey, we just get the alert that, hey, my Netflix bill is going to go up next month. Oh, well, so if we value those things, which we do, we're going to pay more for them. And then I think it's also a good point to make that as we also mature, we're also picking more strategic customers to work with, right? We're not, scrambling to sign up, Bob's Tackle Shop down the street just so we can keep the lights on anymore. So as these businesses mature over time, we're also engaging with more strategic and mature business owners themselves. It makes it easier to charge more.
Right. They're willing to pay more.
Yeah, for sure. So, Rich, are there any other, one more notable prediction from your 2020 story before we send the audience there to go check it out for themselves?
Well, and I'll give you a quick one, which is archiving. So I spoke, as I do every year, with Greg Schultz, who is, the sort of foremost storage expert who I am in regular contact with. And, it is no great secret that data is pouring in from every direction in ever-increasing volumes. And so the question becomes, how do you store all that as cost-effectively as possible? And when people are thinking about extending the capacity and the life of storage devices, the first two, phrases or words that come to mind are compression and deduplication. The third piece of that formula is archiving, getting the stuff that doesn't actually need to be on that primary storage array or even the backup array somewhere else that's much cheaper for it to be. And he expects 2020 to be a pretty big year for archiving precisely for that reason. People need a cheaper way to deal with all of this data that keeps pouring in.
It's not going away either. The amount of data being generated this year compared to just 5 years ago, but it's a staggering increase.
It's unbelievable, and we started out talking about IoT, and that's driving a lot of it.
Now, is there anybody out there saying, maybe we don't have to keep all of this data? Is there any strategies or predictions around tools or processes, ideas to help businesses decide what can actually go rather than having to store all this stuff?
Maybe not predictions, but that too is another topic to revisit at some point on the show, because it's a really interesting issue, and it's almost less about storage than it is about security. But people really do need to think about data as having a life cycle, and part of that life cycle is, if you don't need it anymore, get rid of it. Because it's not only going to save you some storage space, but it's just one less thing for somebody to steal, basically. So it really is a part of a complete security strategy, is thinking about what do we have out there. And it could be data, it could be applications as well. What is out there that doesn't really need to be out there anymore that we can get rid of?
Yeah, and to that point, some of the breaches that we've seen have been archived databases of things that people just forgotten about and had not placed enough focus of security around. And, that's interesting because, as we know, a lot of these cloud storage companies, I think AWS, you think they have all these different tiers of storage. So if you need your data right away, you're going to pay the most for that data. But they have all the way down to their lowest tier, which I think is called Glacier or whatever. And,
yep.
And it is very cost effective, right? But they get you when you need to retrieve that data. But, your point, Rich, even I think, brings another level of required awareness, is that, just because you can store it for like a penny doesn't mean you should keep it out there, because, it's going to be vulnerable to a hacker. And, I like to say that, sometimes it's not, it's who's the data the most important to. So, I talk to partners that, are trying to figure out how to sell cybersecurity, and they say the objection they get from business owners is, well, who wants my data, right? Nobody wants my data. I'm a small, business. Well, you want your data. You want your data. So these folks aren't really being strategic with the SMB. They're just like shotgunning, trying to ransom you, because what they do want is your Bitcoin ransom. That's what they want. So, we have to think about, where we're storing and keeping this data. And to your point, how much of it do we really need? Do we need 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Heck, imagine employment files and healthcare records and things like that, right?
Social security numbers in them, and
it's risky.
Absolutely, very risky.
To wrap up everything we've been talking about, as we're talking about this, it reminds me of an anecdote that Alex Hoff shared with me from Auvik. And it gets to, knowing what's out there, knowing if anyone needs it, getting rid of it if it doesn't, and the importance of being able to read the network to do that. He said he was talking, or was in a meeting, I guess, with an MSP who went into a customer environment and did an inventory of everything on the network and found a Novell network server that was sitting in a back room somewhere. It's been chugging away for probably decades.
Became sentient back there.
Nobody knew it was there. Nobody was using it. It was on the network, folks. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. Whoever made that power supply, kudos to them that it lasted as long as it did. That's pretty incredible. All right. So to wrap up this particular segment, Eric, I want to ask you to make to look back at the last decade and tell me something that you got wrong, and then look forward to the next decade and make a prediction. And you know what? It doesn't even necessarily have to be industry related. It'd be kind of cool if it was, but anything got wrong or any predictions going forward.
Here's what I got wrong in the prior decade. I thought we were past MSP. I thought, the mid 2000s to 2010, 11. As I was going out and building lots of training and education and working with partners, I never thought that I would still today be consulting with partners that want to move toward that MSP business model. I figured everybody would have gotten it, and we'd be talking about cloud and security now. But it seems that folks are still, trying to figure that out, and make the decision to move toward it, or have not succeeded at it, right? Because they've been at it for many years now and just haven't really figured out the processes to be successful and then to be able to grow their businesses in other areas. So I got that wrong. I figured, you know what, we're done with that. I'm going to move forward. And so that's one thing that I got wrong. So I think there's always a need for education, training, and enablement for this industry in developing just really good best practices for managing IT networks. I thought we'd be leapfrog past that I thought we'd all be in the cloud now, and there'd be no hardware. There'd be devices on the network, and everything would be cloud-based. So I got that completely wrong. The next decade, I think I was a decade too soon. I'm gonna say yes. I think in the next decade is where we are going to see more movement toward the cloud. I think it'll be appliance-based computing. I think we see that from folks like Microsoft that say they're now, focused on making apps that can be utilized on every device. So I foresee that being more of the future, where we're going to have stuff that's going to be in the cloud. We're going to figure out security, or we're going to have really good insurance and processes to help out when something gets hacked, and smarter folks helping us that way. But I think appliance-based, mobile devices and computing devices, I think more of the processing and the servers and all that will be in the cloud, hopefully, and that IT providers will finally begin to learn their true value is delivering business outcomes through technology and not delivering hardware and software licensing through technology.
It's a good prediction, and we'll have you on in 2030 in January to see how close you were.
Mark the date, Santa Barbara.
We'll have you sitting back in that chair.
That'd be fun.
But if you listen, it's possible that the world will end by then. So anything's possible. But if that happens, we'll just have you on a little earlier.
Cool.
All right. So we're gonna make another bold prediction, and I predict we are gonna take a break. And when we come back from break, we are going to have on our Peer of the Year award winner, a new award that we're doing here at ChannelPro. Joining us is going to be Colleen Frye, managing editor at ChannelPro, to talk about that. And we're going to have the Peer of the Year award winner, Joanna Sobran from MXOtech, on as well to talk about that and to learn a little bit about her. So it's going to be a great segment. Stick around. We will be right back. All right, and welcome back to part 2 here of ChannelPro Weekly, where we're going to have a great guest join us, 2 guests, in fact, for an interview segment of a new award that we're giving out here at ChannelPro. And so here to tell us about the award and the awards program is managing editor Colleen Frye.
Hey, Matt. Thanks so much.
Hi, welcome. Good to have you back on the show. It's been a while.
It has been. Thanks so much. Good to be back. So I'm so excited to tell everybody about our inaugural Peer of the Year Award. And for a long time, ChannelPro has been inviting MSP owners and IT solution providers to tell their story and share it with our audience. And we call these our peer-to-peer stories. And so this year we decided we needed a Peer of the Year Award. And so the editors, you included, we looked back at the 12 stories told to us by our peers this year. And after much deliberation, because they were all great stories, and we chose Joanna. And the main criteria was that Joanna's story was something that our readers could really, take a lot away from, apply parts of it to their business, right away. It was very useful information on how they could do something better. And in Joanna's case, it was hiring and retaining staff. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce our audience to Joanna Sobran of MXOtech in Chicago. Hey, Joanna.
Hi, Colleen. Hi, Matt.
Hi, welcome. Glad to have you here. Always better to have you on to actually talk to you rather than just talk about you.
Thank you. Yes.
So, Joanna, why don't you tell us a little bit about MXOtech and a little bit about you before we get started?
Great. Well, MXOtech, we're a MSP here in Chicago in the West Loop. We also do software development. I started the company, this year will be 15 years ago, as kind of an idea after working for two successful women. I've always been into software development, working with applications for clients because that's what drives their business. But then I enjoy supporting our customers and providing their customer service, security, help desk support. And so I've married the two together now for the last few years, and we're able to provide applications and MSP to our small, mid-sized market, but we also work with enterprise level customers.
Great. So, Joanna, let me just start by congratulating you first for being our inaugural Peer of the Year winner. And I know that you've received a lot of cool recognition in the past couple of years, but this is the sweetest, right? No, I'm kidding. You don't have to answer that.
Well, this is a great award, Colleen, because it's a peer award, right? And so you always hold yourself to the highest standard with your peers because they know exactly what you're up to. And I just enjoy working with people, and I really, I love the peer idea because we in our community help one another, and that's how we've been able to successfully grow our business, is to share ideas. And you know, when I was writing that article, I felt like I didn't want it to be a sales pitch. I really wanted to be something that people could take away and implement in their business.
Great. So let's dive into your topic a little bit that you shared with our readers about hiring and retention. And it was a great story, Joanna. So I think you started, let's actually back up a little bit. You're a 100% woman-owned business.
Yes.
And I know you bought out your partner 4 or 5 years ago? Right. And so one of the first things you did or you started to do was build a leadership team. So maybe let's start there about how you went about building a leadership team.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, you know, it started for me. I loved running the business. And because I am a woman-owned business, I felt like I wanted to prove to everyone that I can do everything and I can wear multiple hats and I'm a woman and I'm going to do this. I don't need anyone to help me, right? And then I realized I really can't do that. And even men have a lot of help behind them. So there's nothing to be ashamed of. And
absolutely not.
Yeah. And when
you're a working mom, so you have many hats.
I wear many hats, and I have 3 beautiful girls. And you know, as they get older, you think when they're babies, you need to spend a lot of time with them. But when they get older, they require even more time, right? Because they have auditions and programs that they're in and, you know, tests they have to prepare for. So that's when I really did realize I needed help, was because of my girls and my partner had left. And for me, a big thing is working with people that I can relate to, where we're aligned, we follow the same core values. And so when I started to build my leadership team, the first thing I did, first step, was I read the Traction book, and I wanted something that could give me an entrepreneurial operating system, because I thought, well, it's going to be hard for people to do everything the Joanna way. And I never really had it documented. And I thought, well, I can create it all from scratch, or I could find something that already works and is successful for individuals. And so I read the Traction book. I fell in love with it. And I thought, this is very much aligned with who I am and how I want to run my business. And I can marry that with my core values and processes, and then bring in individuals that could help me, and we can, you know, kind of all row in the same direction. And so I went outside. I started looking for individuals, but then I found that I had really great people here at MXO. And so I began my process, and I started to coach up some of the individuals that worked for me. One of them ended up falling out, and the other 3 ended up really growing and enhancing and embracing the whole leadership role and the process. And there's some of my key employees that have been here for a while. And then one of them I brought in brand new that had the expertise that I needed to run the application side of our business. So it was a combination of creating a process, or bringing one in, growing some of the folks that were here that were already performing really well, bringing in individuals. Oh, and then I also brought in a coach, Traction coach, to help kind of pull it all together with me.
Right. And tell me the roles that you established in your leadership team.
Key roles for me were director of IT, service manager, director of client services, a chief technology officer that runs our application side of the business. And then recently I added an integrator role. And so who's handling operations and finance. And then of course I am over our vision, marketing and sales. And then, a lot of other hats, but really I try to stick with the vision and sales and marketing. That's what I'm passionate about. And culture is a big one for me. Continuing to grow the company aligned with the culture that I've established.
Right. Now you've talked about culture and your core values. Is this something that you established after reading Traction and becoming part of EOS, or did you have those core values first?
Well, we actually had core values first. I did that a long time ago, but as the company grew, I realized that those same core values weren't really aligned with the direction that we were going in once we did like our vision for the company after implementing Traction. I looked at the vision and I said, well, are these the core values that are going to get us to this, 5-10 year plan? And I realized they weren't. And so we modified them. I didn't change them completely, but I modified them a bit so that, we can get to that point.
And tell me a little bit about your hiring process. It was quite detailed, and I know that it dovetails quite a bit with your core values.
Absolutely. I think, a lot of people have similar type of hiring processes, and it's not really the one thing that works. It's having a lot of tools and a lot of various tasks and putting a workflow together with a lot of different components that you tie together to make that hiring process successful. So the first thing we do really is we go out and source people. We use regular sourcing ways, everything from LinkedIn, Indeed, different, job boards. We have a referral program here at MXO. So we've had several of candidates come in through our existing employees. And that's been really cool because, birds of feather flock together. So we have a great employee and they bring in a recommendation, a referral. They're usually work out very well. So there's different ways of sourcing candidates. But once we do, we make sure that they're aligned from a core value standpoint. We give them our core values, and then we ask them to write a description about what those mean to them. We also bring in our candidates to meet with the individual manager, but then they have to do a group interview. And what's cool on the group interview, we have our core values listed, and then there's like a scoring sheet. I mean, we make it super simple. They get a plus, they get a plus minus, or they get a minus. And everybody has to pretty much be in agreement. And if someone's giving them a plus minus, we talk about, can we get that person to a plus? If there's too many minuses, it's definitely a no. One of the things I implemented recently over the last couple of years that has been successful for us is whiteboarding. So I ask people to whiteboard for me, what does their current job look like in a day and in a week and like kind of in a month, what their KPIs are. And so what I find is that when people have to write something, and I tell them I'm going to take a photo of it afterwards. So when people have to write something down on a board, they're really truthful, right? Because now it's in writing. And when you're asking people to tell you, sometimes, they can elaborate a little bit, right? And tell you maybe what the ideal role would be, not actually what's going on. But when I ask them to detail it out, I can see their presentation skills. After all, we're a consulting firm. Everyone has to have really good communication skills and presentation skills. I get to see their handwriting. That it's okay if it's not great, right? But it depends on the job. I get to see their organizational skills. I get to see the detail that they put into it, their thought process. So pretty much for every job now, they have to whiteboard their current position and what that looks like. And then there's various tests. I still use a DISC assessment. I was recently hiring for a position that is going to be really involved in some of the decision making. And I knew that I wanted that person to be a high D and a high I and my personality score. And so I wanted someone that kind of resembles, the way my personality is, because they're going to make a lot of decisions in the company. And so I knew going into it, that's the disc score I wanted them to have. And when they took the test, those were the results for the final candidate. And when the other candidates came in, with like a C or an S and a really low D and an I knew that wouldn't be a good fit. And usually I can
excuse me, Joanna, for those of us in the audience who may not know what that is, can you tell us what that test, that score represents? The DISC?
Yeah. DISC assessment is something I've used for a really long time. So someone who has a high D, they're usually dominating type personality. They can make decisions. They're strong, kind of A type. An I is someone who's very influential. So it's someone who's really good, like for an account management role, I want a high I. These people are pleasers. They're very customer service oriented. So I'm a high D and a high I. I like both. And then, an S and a C is really good for engineers. They're very detail oriented. They like processes. So I definitely don't want a high D and an I for an engineer. I want them to be more of a C and an S versus a salesperson, right? Or someone in a leadership role.
Right.
It's funny. I actually just also ran a DISC assessment, but the answer was just healthy.
It was just healthy? Oh,
Sorry, keep going.
Good one, Matt. Good one.
All right, Matt. Yuck, right? So anyways, Joanna, so you used that score. I know that you mentioned you had some other tests too, depending upon the position. Can you just give us some samples of other tests you might administer during an interview?
Absolutely. So another one, especially on our development side or someone like a developer, a QA, an analyst, we do give them a technical test. They have to actually do some development so we could see their coding practices. For an engineering position, they will also get a technical test. It could be a whiteboard test where they're describing, tell me how email gets from point A to point B. It could be just a written test that they take to explain about a cloud environment, or it could be just an actual technical test that they take using some kind of platform. So there's different ones that we apply for different people. In sales, account management versus technical versus development versus customer service.
Right. And it's all a process that you follow that same process per position. Is that correct?
Yes, we do. We stay consistent with it. I'm glad you actually brought that up. That's a really key point. I tell my managers, when you're interviewing for a position, do not change your interview process. Why? Because you can't fairly compare how one candidate did against the other one because you're measuring different things if you're changing the interview process. So if you're interviewing 3-4 people, you want to compare all of them equally. So that's really important. Now, you can maybe change the process as you grow and you develop over time, right, but make sure it's consistent for that same interview period. That would be the biggest recommendation I would have.
Great. And then broadly, most people go through three touch points with you, right? A phone screening, they come in and they meet one-on-one with the manager and then with the group. And then how do you come to a decision after this process?
The group gets together and we keep also the same people consistently are part of that interview process, right? We don't change the people, we don't change the test, we don't change the whiteboarding session, everything's the same. And then at the end, that group gets together and we fill out that core value sheet that I mentioned to you. All 5 core values are listed, and then there's 3 other components at the end. Do they want it? Do they get it? And do they have the capacity to do it? I got that from Traction as well, right? So pretty much everyone has to be in agreement. If there's someone that's off and has a concern, we talk about it and we figure out as a group, is there an ability to train that person? Do they want it? Do they get it? Do they have the capacity to do it? And then we'll get them to that point. So if they're 80, 90% there, they have everything we really want. There's, maybe one thing that they haven't had the experience in because it just wasn't available to them, you know, we decide. So the times that we're usually on the same page, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that one of your keys too is that you're always recruiting. So tell me what that looks like. What does that mean?
Absolutely. So you will see, I don't have to tell you that, you'll see on my LinkedIn page, now that we're connected, you can see that I'm constantly recruiting. We just came up with a really fun ad. I try to do a different strategy every year. So right now, we have an interesting ad that gets people's attention that's just kind of like always on my LinkedIn, and then other people can share it. So we have the referral program within our company. Anytime someone refers a candidate to us, they get a bonus from us, right? And then they get to work with someone that they know and that they like. We talk about it in our company quarterly meeting. So our company, everyone in our company is mandatory to get together, even if it's a remote session, but everyone usually is in person. And we talk about the state of the company, how we're doing, what's going on, and then we talk about who we're going to be bringing in, what is the goal, what we're hiring. So everyone here knows. It's always on our social media. We have ads, and we're just talking about it constantly. People even my friends know I'm always recruiting, so they're sending candidates to me, right? Anyone who's in IT gets sent over.
Right. So even though you may not have an immediate opening, you're filling your pipeline so that you're ready when you need to hire someone.
Yeah, and we've actually taken it a little step further. Even though our managers are very busy, and people will, CEOs, leaders of companies know the managers will always tell you they're busy, they don't have time to interview, right? Because they don't have that immediate need now. Right. So they're like, no, I'll just do it. Right now I'm busy, I have 10 other things. So I've asked my managers to bring in or do phone interviews at least twice a month. So like our director of services who leads our help desk team, he does about 2 phone interviews or in-person interviews, or a combination of the 2 every single month, because I tell him when somebody leaves or we happen to acquire 3 large customers all at the same time, I don't want you to be scrambling. I want you to be able to pick up the phone and say, Danny, it was amazing talking to you. I really liked you. Great candidate. When we talked last month, are you still looking for an opportunity? Can you come in? Can we get the process started? So they don't have to go through the whole process of coming in, doing group interviews and doing that, but at least make that connection, right? It's just like any advice I would give to anyone, network, know good people in your industry. So when you have a need and you need to bring in a consultant to help you with your operations, right? You know who to call now. That's all.
Mm-hmm. And something that folks might not know about you, Joanna, is that you came here as a child from Poland with your parents. And so that I know that you recruit from some unusual spots too. Want to tell us about that?
Yeah. So I grew up in Poland, and when I came here, I had to adjust to this country. We didn't live in the best neighborhood. I didn't have the greatest influences around me. And at 19 years old, I worked at a country club, and this gentleman who was a member said, you don't want to be a waitress for the rest of your life. I know you're making good money now, but why don't you go and interview at this job for these 2 women, actually where I ended up getting my career started. And through them, I watched and I learned. And I think a lot of people are like that, right? If you can see it, then you know it's attainable. And so what I decided to do is try to bring in people from underserved communities using an organization called Year Up here in Chicago, to bring them in here to interview. They have the potential, they're smart, they did well in the program. We bring them in, we pair them up with people that are more experienced to give them an opportunity to see what it could be like to be the first person in their family to work in tech, to come in an office, to dress up every day, right? Another organization that we work with is called Upwardly Global. And they bring in refugees. They have green cards, but they bring in refugees, people who had successful careers, in their countries, but just haven't had the opportunity to work here in the U.S. They don't know the culture. They don't understand maybe, or people don't want to hire them because their last job was in India. And so they think, well, you don't have any U.S. experience. But really, they're incredibly smart people, and a lot of them are women because they come to this country, they get married to someone that's been here in the U.S. or is recruited for a job here, and they had a child or two, and so it's hard for them to get into the workforce. So we've been really successful. We've hired 2 women. One of them has moved on. One continues to work for us still, and has moved up from a QA to now a project manager role, and it's been really successful for us. And I think what's great too about it is it impacts our culture in a positive way. People see that we don't just hire someone because they're a perfect fit. We hire someone to give back, and these people have been really dedicated to us. So it's brought a lot of joy for me, and I kind of want to give back and treat people the same way that they treated me, which has allowed me to be where I am today.
Mm-hmm. So recruiting sort of outside the traditional pipeline has been successful for you. Would you recommend this for your peers as well, to look to these sort of unconventional areas to find help?
Absolutely. And a lot of times people will say, I want to bring diversity to my company. And diversity could mean a lot of things. It could mean,
right.
Bringing in women into tech because there's still not a lot of women. It could mean bringing in people from different culture, different, color skin, different neighborhoods. It could mean a lot of things, right? And when you just put out an ad to, on, Career Builder, Indeed, LinkedIn, you can't control that. But when you want to be intentional about that and you say that and you truly want to do it, you have to go out and look for these kind of organizations because that's how you're going to drive that diversity. That's how you're going to give back. You can't put an ad and wish and hope it's going to happen. You have to be very intentional. So I recommend it. I think it's been fantastic all around. And when you're in business for 15 years, you have to look at growing your company in other ways and giving opportunities and being a part of your community and not just, looking at the bottom line.
Right. That's a great story. I wondered if anyone else on the line has anything to ask for Joanne before we congratulate her one more time and let her get back to her busy day.
I do have a question. Hey, Joanna, it's Rich.
Hi, Rich.
I think a lot of people who are listening or watching right now, when they think about success in this field, the first things that come to mind are the technologies that I sell and the technologies that I use and, getting my pricing right and sales and marketing. And all those things are really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
If you're running a $5 million a year business, people have been absolutely critical to getting there. And in fact, from your profile here, you really your strategy for getting to 5 million began with people. So, just philosophically speaking, you put so much time and effort into really getting this hiring and retention process right. Why, from your perspective, are the people that you have working for you so critical for success as a channel pro?
Well, they're like on the lines every day, right? I can't talk to every single one of my customers. They represent me, and I feel very strongly about my brand. I feel very strongly about the raving fans, not just customers. And so everyone is an extension of Joanna in a way. And for me to do that, I have to hire people that are aligned with me, that have the same values, they have the same desires. And so if I hire the right people, I can focus on actually growing the business, on those tools, on profitability and all those things, right? Because they're taking care of MXOtech. And so it gives me the time to have peace of mind and allow me to do the strategy so they can grow my business. That's really the bottom line. And when you're constantly focused on, people, right? Because they're human beings. And so when there's problems with people, you're only focused on that. You can't grow your business. So for me, it's critical. We're in the people business. That's what we're in.
We are, and it's a fantastic story, well worth a read. So for people who want to learn more about you and the Peer of the Year award, we're going to put links to the article that you contributed, as well as all the information about the Peer of the Year Award, so they can check out more of that. If anybody wanted to get a hold of you offline, visit a website or the social channels, where would they go?
Well, it's www.mxotech.com is my company. And if anyone ever wants to get a hold of me, LinkedIn is a great way. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I check it. And they can just call my office. You know, I've helped a lot of peers in the industry. I'm happy to spend a little time. If you can prepare your questions and if you have actual problem or something that you're looking to solve, I'm happy to jump on a call and give some assistance. I'm part of Robin Robbins' program, so people usually who join that, I do a lot of speaking there, and I'm always available. Yeah, I like giving back. I enjoy helping people.
Well, fantastic. And so on behalf of everyone here, another congratulations is our very first Peer of the Year and a 2020 Peer of the Year Awards.
Thank you. And I really appreciate ChannelPro and all of you in helping me navigate this process and just really having the opportunity to give back. I'm looking forward to speaking at some of your events as well. I'm just excited and sharing, and hopefully I can help a company or two to get to where I am today. If it wouldn't be for the people that mentored me and helped me and my staff, I wouldn't have this opportunity. So it's all about the people you surround yourself with.
Well, that's exciting. Rich, do we have her locked in for any events this year?
A whole bunch of them, absolutely. And
wow.
Yeah, she and Colleen will be talking about some of this same great stuff that they've been discussing on the podcast here.
Well, that is awesome. So to see where Joanna's
I think our first event, Colleen, is in Dallas, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward. Karen and I are going to come out to Dallas, and I'll be there, and I'm happy to share. So if anybody wants to come out to Dallas, where it's a little warmer than here in Chicago, I will be there.
Well, awesome. Yeah, so definitely check out our events website, events.channelpronetwork.com, and to see where Ms. Joanna Sobran is going to be speaking. And you can come out and see her live. So that is super exciting. Yeah. Well, we're gonna go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we're gonna hit our end of the show regular features that we have. I got a museum pick and a tech pick for you all. So stick around for that. We will be right back. And we are back with part 3 of ChannelPro Weekly. That was a great interview, guys. What do you think?
I think it was great. She's phenomenal. As we were saying, I can't be more excited that she's going to be at our shows because I really haven't had a chance much to speak with her before. I'm sure folks in the audience are going to enjoy getting a chance to ask some questions and share experiences with her. So, just great stuff.
Yeah, very inspiring. And I've got to say, she's got it figured out. The most successful business owners that I work with follow a framework such as EOS. They're doing behavioral profiling, such as this behavioral profiling, and they understand the importance of putting their people first. So, I mean, she's got all of those things, prioritized properly, and it reflects in her success. And she's very, again, just very inspiring and very engaging. And, the work that she's doing to reach out and help, the underprivileged and even the channel. You guys made a great selection for Peer of the Year.
Fantastic. I agree. She was great. And for those who are listening, keep an eye on the social channels. Rich and I are actually going to get a chance to visit her in person in February because Rich is going to be out here in the area, and we're going to go down to Chicago and present her with a plaque, and we're going to take some pictures. So we'll share those online when those happen. Right, Rich?
Absolutely. Just a few weeks away.
Very cool. All right. Well, we do have some end of the show roundup features. I do have a museum pick for you all this week. I don't normally like to do consumer devices back to back, but last week we talked about the Sega Genesis because we had Jeff Halash on, and he mentioned that before the show, and I'm like, oh well, I have one of those. Let's talk about that as a museum pick. Well, so I decided to go ahead and do another Sega device, which I thought would be fun to talk about. So for those who are watching on YouTube, I'm gonna hold it up. For those who are not watching on YouTube, what I'm holding up here is the Sega Game Gear. This was Sega's first portable system, kind of a response to Nintendo's Game Boy in the market way back in the day. It used interchangeable cartridges, which looked like these. This is apparently a Star Trek game that I got used at one point. What made this interesting is it was bigger. Where the Game Boy was more vertical, this was kind of a horizontal format. This also had a backlit color screen, which was definitely a nice improvement over the competing portable game systems at the time. So you can actually see it. This also took a massive quantity of batteries. So whereas the Game Boy ran for about 14 hours on 4 AA's, I believe, this ran for about 6 hours on 6 AA's. So by the time you load this bad boy up, it was actually pretty heavy and kind of bulky to carry around. The original model was also popularized by a popular accessory I had at the time, which was a TV tuner add-on. So you could plop it in, and you could pull the antenna up, and you could receive and watch local broadcast stations. I don't know if you knew that had that. So Eric, did you have a Game Gear or Game Boy back in the day?
I did not, but my my oldest son had, I think, every iteration of Game Boy, but did not had the Sega Genesis, but not the Game Gear. That one, we missed out on that one.
It was kind of expensive back in the day, and the games were good. Not many would argue that the quality of games, even though the display wasn't anywhere near as nice, but just the games on the Game Boy were generally better. But there were some really good notable ones. Now, Rich, I know you had many Game Gears back in the day. I think you bought 7 or 8 of these, right?
Never a Game Gear. As we're talking about this, so I'm remembering the Game Boy, and man alive, this has to be like 1992 or 3. My first job in the tech industry. The guy who owned this little company gave everybody a Game Boy. It was like everyone's holiday gift. And if there's anything that I could actually contribute to the museum, I'm pretty sure I still have that.
Really?
A very, very old Game Boy, but never a Game Gear.
Ooh, we're gonna have. I don't think we've ever talked about the Game Boy on the show before. I have many versions of it, but I would probably be interested to see which version you have and have you kick off the Game Boy Museum discussion at some point down the road, but we'll take a little break from gaming for a little while. But yeah, a very, very cool item to have in the museum. A very neat portable gaming system. Again, kind of big. I mean, this isn't the most portable thing in the world, but it was considered portable. Now, another interesting note, because I know people are going to ask, there also was a portable version of the Sega Genesis that was made. So like this, the Game Gear actually has its own game format, the Game Gear games, but there was a portable Genesis console made that was kind of looked like the Game Gear. Yeah, even though I think of a little touch bigger, slightly different display, but like you actually dropped in the Genesis cartridge into this thing on the go. So it was like you were playing a Genesis on the go, which was also a pretty cool machine to have. But I actually don't have one of those. I have my eyes open for one, though, if I ever run across one in my travels for a reasonable cost. So
wait, one question. So we're talking about the Sega Genesis. You whipped out a Star Trek cartridge.
Yes.
Does that game have the Genesis, the Genesis planet in it?
Well, this is the Star Trek The Next Generation Advanced Holodeck Tutorial.
Okay.
So my guess is probably not in this one.
No. Genesis was back in Wrath of Khan.
Right.
Right? When Khan, landed everybody or transported them down to the Genesis planet that, the Genesis device had created. So, yeah, that was original.
Was that Wrath of Khan? I thought that was Star Trek 5. No, the Genesis device was Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country.
He's absolutely right.
No, you sure?
Wrath of Khan,
Wrath of Khan, baby.
And then isn't that where Spock came back to life?
Spock came back to life in the third one, which was Star Trek: The Search for Spock. Don't challenge me on Star Trek now.
Khan activates Genesis. You are correct. They
torpedoed Spock. It was a very sad moment when they put Spock in the torpedo tube and jettisoned him out, and actually he landed on the planet that the Genesis device had created after the fact, and then supposedly somehow the Genesis effect regenerated him.
Yeah, that's right. It's been a while since I've watched the original movies, except for number 4. I think I know I probably recite that entire movie from my brain.
Nice.
Because I think I watched it 100 million times with my parents because that was like my dad's favorite. So I've seen that one a lot, but I haven't watched 2 and 3 in quite a long time. But so good memory.
Yeah, of the original movies with the original cast, Wrath of Khan is absolutely my favorite.
Totally.
Yeah, I remember. I avoided watching it again because I saw it when I was little. And the scene, and I will never get this out of my head, the scene where like the bug thing drives into his ear.
It is kept
in our bodies.
Yeah, that was that was a rough one.
Yeah.
I think I avoided that movie for like 10 years after that. Scarred me for life. I still can't look at a bug like an earwig, and I always run away. Yeah, no, we won't even talk about that. All right, so good. So as far as a tech pick, well, I did an obvious one last week when we talked about the Genesis. I picked the Genesis Mini as a modern day tech pick, so you could relive some of the old Genesis games. There really isn't like a Game Gear Mini, so there's not really something that I can point to like that. But portable gaming is still something that some people want, and of course, like the mobile phones today have dominated mobile games. And you always have, your phone on you, so you have gaming in your pocket. But that's not necessarily good mobile gaming, right? So, what I'm going to do is pick a modern day portable gaming machine that is sold right now that I think is really good. So I'm going to pick the Nintendo Switch Lite. Now I could say the Switch. The Switch is, of course, if you want that, but that's kind of big, and it's kind of like a half home console. I don't know if you've ever seen the Switch before, Eric or Rich, but it's basically a tablet that has like these little removable controllers on the side, and it also comes with a dock, so you can plug it into the TV. So it's like a home console, and it's like you can just lift it right off and keep playing on the 7-inch display that it has. Now Nintendo made a slightly smaller, more portable version where the controllers don't come off, called the Switch Lite. Retails for $199. So if portable gaming is really what you're interested in, that would be the one to get. It's kind like the Game Gear, but with a much, much bigger screen and more buttons and stuff, and a lot thinner, and with better battery life. But my son has one of these Switch machines, the Nintendo Switch, and it's got a lot of great games. It's a lot of fun. He doesn't have the light one. Because that didn't come out at the time. He's just got the big one. But he has a case, and he takes it with him, and he can play his games. And when he gets home, he puts it in the TV, and it's great. So I think if you are looking for a modern day console that's dedicated to gaming, not like an iPad, not like a Samsung tablet or whatever, but dedicated to portable gaming, I think that would be a fine choice. What do you think?
I like that choice. The Nintendo Switch was a Christmas gift at our household this past Christmas, and just a tip, FYI, for those of you looking to get one, make sure you get the second revision, which dramatically increases the battery life of the device. So you can search online and figure out how to tell based upon, I think, the serial number, or not the serial number, but the model number and things like that. But you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. My son's is a first gen because it was before the second one came out. And I was actually kind of bummed because it came out like 6 months later, there was that revised one with the better battery. But what can you do at that point? But yeah, that bumps the battery life from about 3.5 hours-ish to about 7.
Yeah.
But like I said, for people who are really focused on portable, the Switch Lite also has really good battery life too.
Yeah.
And then that'll run for a while. He uses it at home a lot. So having the 3.5 hour battery is not that big of a deal. And you can like plug in battery packs and plug it in the car and stuff. So we do that. But so have you tried any of the Switch games, Eric?
I've just watched them play them, and I'm just amazed at just the graphics and the responsiveness. I mean, and their favorites are all big surprise, the Mario line of games, Mario Kart, Mario Party, Mario this, Mario that. They just love those games. I mean, and those have been perennial favorites. I mean, that's what, Nintendo built its company on, and just the brilliance of, the original designer that designed those games. It just, continues to pay off.
Yeah, my son got Luigi's Mansion 3 over the Christmas break, and I probably have to admit, I think I've played it more than he has. But it's a super fun game. So if your kids don't have that one, grab that for them, and you should give it a whirl because it's pretty fun.
All right.
So that's my tech pick, the Nintendo Switch. Eric, before we go, I know you're a big fan of Formula One racing, and I know the Formula One racing season is starting up here in March. Yep. Any predictions for the coming year?
It's last season was quite a surprise. I mean, there was all kinds of, finally, the leaders got some real competition there. I'm going to reserve my judgment. I think that, the top teams finally have figured out. I think Ferrari's really coming on strong, and I think Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes team, they got a little surprise last season. So we'll have to see, man. It's going to be dicey. I don't know. I haven't kept up quite as much as I would like to on the new design of the new cars. I know that there are some significant changes being made, especially in terms of tire size and things like that. So it's almost going to be anybody's guess because so many changes are going to be applied this season. And I think that there's no way they'll be able to work out all the bugs, during testing before the season starts. So, we'll see. I mean, I still love Lewis Hamilton, but I do love a great, duke out between two great teams. So we'll find out.
Absolutely. We'll keep an eye on it. And as we have you back on throughout the year, we'll pop over to you to get the Formula One updates and see what has surprised you throughout the season for all of our listeners who are also racing fans.
Sounds good.
So, Rich, we've already kind of had a little bit of predictions about things from last year to this year, but if you were to tell us what happened like last week, you would also probably be correct because you tend to be right 100% of the time when you talk about what happened last week. And then you're going to try to tell us about what's going to happen next week, and we're like, 50-50 on this. So tell us what you think.
Well, the reason I am so good at telling people what happened before is because every Friday I go to ChannelProNetwork.com and I read our In Case You Missed It post, where James Gaskin runs through all sorts of stuff you may have missed in the week's news, including anytime Google does anything that really shows they're taking the business world seriously, I get a little interested. They have a new premium support offering that they introduced this week for businesses specifically. Some new projectors for the K through 12 market from Epson, a new addition to the D&H line card, and a new potential use for medical marijuana for fans of certain particular football teams that maybe haven't seen the postseason in a while. James will tell you all about that. And then looking ahead to next week, actually, Eric and I both will be attending the first SMB Tech Fest event of 2020. Our friend, our sometime guest host on the podcast, Dave Seibert, runs those quarterly events in Southern California. I will be down there alongside Eric, and we can tell you a little bit about what's going on there. And what is else? So Gary Pica, who is another early MSP way back in the day and is now a consultant to MSPs. He's doing his annual Schnizzfest event next year, a little bit earlier than he's done it before, but that's going on too.
Sounds like an exciting week ahead. So everybody make sure you tune your web browsers over to channelpronetwork.com and that way you can keep an eye on all the stories and stuff that we're just talking about. Hit the homepage as they happen in real time. Like I said earlier, lots of great articles, news, press releases going up each and every day, all the time. So definitely check that out. If you'd like to subscribe to Channel Pro Weekly, that's what I highly recommend you do. We're on the iTunes. No, it's Apple Podcasts now. I keep saying iTunes because I'm just like it's like ingrained in my brain, but it's Apple Podcasts. We are there. To subscribe to that, we're also on the Google Play Podcasts section. We're on Stitcher. We're pretty much anywhere podcasts are aggregated. So make sure that you go and you subscribe there, and that way you don't have to check the website when we put the new website. You should be checking the website anyway, but if you're not, you can be on your in the train and poof, new episode magically appears on your phone, and then you can listen along in the background while you work. Go to job sites while you're working, whatever. It's a great time to listen to Channel Pro Weekly. If you'd like to watch Channel Pro Weekly, we are on YouTube. You're watching us here, recording the show. Not a lot of excitement, I would say, in the video version, Rich, but if you want to see our bright, smiley faces and things like the museum pick while we're doing it live, and really the interviews are great to actually watch on video because then you can kind of see everybody talking. But you should subscribe to both, Rich. Shouldn't people subscribe to both?
You know, where else are you going to get tech industry information and palm trees?
Right, absolutely, and some good old-fashioned humor, discussion of Formula One race cars, and video game consoles. You can't go wrong with us, Rich. There's just something for everybody. So
video just brings the podcast to life.
It's true. It's true. You can verify that we are in fact alive. That's important to some people, including myself. So yeah, but you know what? And best of all, it's free. It's free. So subscribe on all those platforms and on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube right now, go ahead, click the red button, hit the subscribe button, and then hit the bell so you get notified when we do new episodes. And of course, if you are also on YouTube, you should also subscribe to the 5 minute. Rich, help me out here.
The Channel Pro 5-minute roundup.
Roundup. I knew the word was in there somewhere. The word roundup has just been taken over my brain by all these commercials advertising of suing Roundup, the maker Roundup, because of all of the cancers that it caused. So when I hear Roundup, I think like chemical for your lawn and cancer. Maybe you should rename the show so people don't think Channel 5-minute cancer.
Yeah, our video is non-toxic.
Promise.
It does not cause cancer. That is really, really good to know. But no, check that out, and make sure you check those out week to week with Mr. Rich Freeman and Mr. Erick Simpson. If you'd like to follow us on the social networks, you got to talk about those. We are on Facebook, Channel Pro Network on Facebook. We're on LinkedIn. We're Channel Pro Network there. We're at Channel Pro SMB on Twitter. If you want to follow me, I'm at Matt Whitlock. Rich is at Rich Free. Eric, where are you on the socials?
At Erick Simpson on Twitter, and I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook.
And your website?
ErickSimpson.com. ERICK Simpson.com.
So go ahead and check out Mr. Erick Simpson's website and hit him up on the socials if you'd like to get to know him or learn a little bit more about him. Eric, thank you so much for guest hosting with us again today. It's always a pleasure having you on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And we will hopefully definitely see you back in the near future. Safe travels from Santa Barbara to everyone watching today. Thank you all for listening and watching. We'll see you all next week.